The day I inherited 3,400 acres, a stranger was already standing on my property. I did not know that yet. I was still 3 hours away, sitting in my Columbus apartment, staring at a phone number I did not recognize, wondering if I should pick up. I picked up. "Miss Hendricks?" Calm voice. Professional. "This is Jonathan Reed and Associates Estate Law. Your Uncle Gerald passed away 2 weeks ago. You are his sole heir." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because my brain had no other response ready. Gerald Hendricks. My father's older brother. A man I had met twice in my entire life. A man my father called complicated, and my mother called unreachable. A man I called nothing, because there was nothing to call him. "Sole heir to what exactly?" I asked. "A 3,400-acre estate in Harlan County. Farmland, timber, a private lake, a farmhouse. No debts. No conditions. It is yours." I sat down slowly on my couch. 3,400 acres. "There must be a mistake," I said. "There is no mistake, Miss Hendricks." A pause. Then, almost gently, "You own a great deal of land." I took 4 days off work and drove 3 hours south into a part of Ohio I had never visited, to claim land I did not know existed from a man I barely knew. The highway became a 2-lane road. The 2-lane road became gravel. The sky got bigger. The billboards disappeared. And then the trees opened up and I saw it, rolling land in every direction, a tree line so dense it looked like a wall, a private lake glinting silver behind it. 3,400 acres of something I still had no word for. I pulled up to the gate and stopped. There was a silver Mercedes parked directly in front of the entrance. Engine running. Parked like it belonged there. Like whoever was inside had known exactly when I would arrive. The door opened before I even stepped out of my car. A woman got out. Perfectly dressed. Manicured nails. A smile so practiced it had its own agenda. She was holding a thick binder against her chest like a weapon. She walked toward me with the confidence of someone who had done this before. "Miss Hendricks," she said, extending her hand. "I am Diana Whitfield, president of the Maplecrest Estates Homeowners Association. Welcome to your property." She knew my name before I introduced myself. I shook her hand, smiled back, and made a note of it. "I know this is overwhelming," she said, gesturing toward the estate like she was showing me a property she was selling. "That is exactly why the HOA exists, to make transitions like this seamless." "I was not told about any HOA," I said. "Most heirs are not." She opened the binder with practiced efficiency. "Your Uncle Gerald was a member of Maplecrest Estates HOA for 9 years. The covenants transfer automatically with ownership. You inherit the membership." She turned the binder toward me. Clean documents. My uncle's name at the top. His signature at the bottom. Dated 9 years ago. I did not touch it. "And the back dues?" I asked. Because I am an accountant. I always ask about the number first. Diana did not blink. $52,000. Said it like she was reading a grocery list. 9 years of unpaid dues plus administrative fees. We have been very patient. Very patient. Like she was doing me a favor. I kept my face neutral. "Never let anyone see which number surprised you." She flipped through the rest: HOA rules, land use restrictions, architectural guidelines. Page after page of fine print. She had an answer for every question I asked. A document for every concern I raised. The whole thing had the rhythm of something memorized, not a conversation, a performance. That bothered me more than the $52,000. When she finally handed me the binder, I noticed her watch. Rose gold. Expensive. Her car, this year's model, not a scratch. Her shoes, not the kind you wear on gravel driveways unless you do it regularly. Diana Whitfield was very comfortable on my property. "I will need time to review everything," I said. "Of course." She handed me her card. 30-day clock starts today. Call anytime." She turned and walked back to her Mercedes with the same unhurried confidence she would arrived with. I watched until her car disappeared. Then I opened the binder to the map at the back. The HOA boundary lines did not follow the edges of a neighborhood. They did not trace a subdivision or a gated community. They cut directly through the middle of my estate. Through the farmland. Through the timber. All the way to the lake. Diana's HOA did not border my property. According to this map, it owned half of it. The farmhouse smelled like old wood and something close to loneliness. Not unpleasant. Just lived in by one person for too long. Stacks of books on every surface. A single coffee mug by the sink, washed and left to dry. A reading chair positioned exactly where the afternoon light would fall. Uncle Gerald had built a careful life here. Small. Deliberate. His. I set my bag down and started walking through rooms. Most of it was ordinary worn furniture, faded curtains, a kitchen that had not been updated since the 90s. But the study was different. The study felt like the inside of someone's mind. Floor-to-ceiling shelves, topographic maps pinned to the walls. Land surveys going back 40 years, filed by date, labeled in small precise handwriting. My uncle was organized. Methodically, obsessively organized. I pulled open the desk drawer. Files. Documents. Property records going back decades. And underneath all of it, an envelope with my name on it, not typed. Handwritten. Claire. He knew my handwriting would not be familiar to me, so he made his as clear as possible. Block letters. Careful and deliberate, like every word cost him something. I sat down and read it. If you are reading this, I did not get the chance to warn you in time. Do not sign anything. Do not trust anyone who already knows your name before you introduce yourself. The land is yours. All of it. I am sorry I waited so long to find you. I read it 3 times. Then I thought about Diana Whitfield standing at my gate that morning. "Miss Hendricks," she had said. Before I introduced myself. Before I said a single word. She already knew my name. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. I did not sleep much that night. At dawn, I pulled on boots and walked the property, partly to clear my head, partly because 3,400 acres deserved more than a glance from a car window. It was extraordinary. I will not pretend otherwise. Rolling farmland giving way to dense forest. A creek running along the eastern edge. And beyond the tree line, the lake. Still in silver in the early morning light, larger than I would imagined. Ringed by old growth trees that had no business being this beautiful. But something was wrong. A fence line cutting through the north field positioned 30 feet inside the property boundary according to the survey maps I would studied the night before. Not on the edge. Inside. A gravel road running through the western timber section. Fresh gravel. Recent use. Not on any map my uncle left. And on the far side of the lake, cleared land. Trees removed. Ground flattened. Like something had been prepared for construction. On my property. Without my knowledge. I was still standing there when I heard boots on gravel behind me. I turned. An older man. Weathered face. Work jacket. The careful movements of someone who had spent 60 years outdoors. He stopped a respectful distance away and removed his hat. "You must be Gerald's niece," he said. "I am Harold. I farm the land to the east. Been here 30 years. He paused. "I wanted to get to you before she did. Looks like I am a day late." "Diana Whitfield," I said. He nodded slowly. "That woman has been running this area for years. Last person who asked too many questions." He stopped. Looked at the cleared land across the lake. "Just do not sign anything. And get yourself a lawyer before the 30 days are up." He put his hat back on and walked away without another word. I turned back to the lake. Somewhere in my uncle's desk there was a locked tin box. I would found it last night going through his papers. Small. Metal. No key anywhere. Whatever was inside, Gerald had hidden the key deliberately. I went back to find it. The Harlan County Courthouse was a squat brick building that looked like it had been there since before the county itself. Stone steps worn smooth by decades of boots. Fluorescent lights inside that hummed at a frequency designed to make everyone look slightly guilty. I arrived at 9 sharp. The records office was at the end of a narrow hallway, behind a counter staffed by a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a beaded chain and ink-stained fingers. Her nameplate said Patricia. She was typing something when I walked in and did not look up. "I need the full title history on a property," I said. 3,400 acres, Harlan County. The estate of Gerald Hendricks. Patricia's typing stopped. She looked up slowly, looked at me, then at the counter between us, then back at me with an expression I could not immediately name, not unfriendly, not afraid, something in between. the look of someone doing a calculation. "You the niece?" she asked. I had not told her my name yet. "Yes," I said carefully. She held my gaze for one moment longer than necessary. Then she turned to her computer without another word and started pulling records. It took 12 minutes. I counted. She set a thick folder on the counter and slid it toward me without speaking. Then she walked to the other end of the room and began filing something in a cabinet with her back to me. I opened the folder. The first document was the original deed. Gerald Hendricks, 3,400 acres. Purchased in 1974. Clean title, no encumbrances, no HOA covenants of any kind. The second document was where everything changed. A covenant amendment, dated 9 years ago. Signed by Gerald Hendricks, apparently adding the estate to the jurisdiction of Maplecrest Estates, OA. Notarized by someone named R. Colton. I set it aside and kept reading. Third document. A parcel transfer. 400 acres of lakefront land. Transferred from the Gerald Hendricks estate to a company called Lakeview Development Partners, LLC. Dated 6 years ago. Signed by Gerald Hendricks. Notarized by R. Colton. I turned the page. Fourth document. Another transfer. 200 acres of timberland. To a company called Green Ridge Holdings, LLC. 5 years ago. Gerald Hendricks. R. Colton. I kept turning pages. My hands had gone very still the way they do when I am processing something large. Fifth, sixth, seventh. 7 separate transfers over 8 years. 3 different shell companies. 100 acres here, 200 there. The lakefront parcel alone sold to a luxury resort developer for $2.8 million. 2 timber parcels leased to a logging company, $900,000. Smaller parcels sold to individual buyers at market rate. By the time I reached the last document, my mouth was dry. 1,100 acres. Gone. $4.2 million. Extracted. And on every single document, my uncle's signature. And beneath it, every single time, the same notary stamp. R. Colton. Harlan County Notary Public. The same notary. 7 documents. 8 years. Never a different hand. I closed the folder. Patricia was still at the filing cabinet, still not looking at me. "Excuse me," I said. She turned. "These signatures." I kept my voice steady. My uncle had a degenerative condition. His hands shook badly in his final years. I have seen his handwriting from that period. I tapped the folder. "These signatures do not shake." Patricia said nothing. "And this notary," I continued. "R. Colton. Same stamp on every document across 8 years. Is that normal?" She walked back to the counter slowly, reached beneath it, pulled out a single sheet of paper and set it down in front of me without a word. It was an internal complaint form, filed 3 years ago by a county records employee named David Marsh. The complaint flagged irregularities in the Hendricks estate transfers, inconsistent signatures, a notary appearing on documents from 2 different counties on the same date, shell companies with no verifiable business addresses. I looked up at Patricia. "What happened to David Marsh?" I asked. She held my gaze. "He was let go," she said quietly. 2 weeks after he filed that. The fluorescent light hummed above us. Somewhere down the hall a door closed. "Is there anything else you need?" Patricia asked. Her voice was careful, neutral. But her eyes said something different. They said, "Take everything in that folder and do not come back alone." "No," I said. "Thank you." I picked up the folder, walked back down the narrow hallway, pushed through the heavy front door, and sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time. $4.2 million, 1,100 acres, 1 notary. And somewhere in my uncle's desk, a locked tin box I still had not opened. I started the car and drove back to the estate. I spent that night at the kitchen table with my laptop, a cold cup of coffee, and the kind of focus I usually reserve for tax fraud cases. Because that is exactly what this felt like. I started with the basics. Diana Whitfield, Maplecrest Estates, HOA President, Harlan County. I typed her name into every public database I knew: property records, business filings, court documents, county archives. When you are an accountant, you learn quickly that people hide money in paperwork, but they can never hide the paperwork itself. It always exists somewhere. It always leaves a trail. What I found took me until 2 in the morning. Diana Whitfield had not always been Diana Whitfield. 10 years ago she was Diana Marsh, married name from a first marriage, divorced, no children, no property, no real estate background of any kind. She had worked in hotel management in Chicago for 6 years. Ordinary career. Ordinary life. Nothing about her suggested she would one day run a homeowners association in rural Ohio like a small private empire. She arrived in Harlan County 9 years ago. Married Robert Whitfield 8 months after arriving. Robert was a real estate developer, mid-sized operation, mostly commercial properties, nothing spectacular. Connected enough to know the right people. Litigious enough that 3 separate contractors had filed complaints against his LLCs in the past decade. Every complaint had been quietly settled. Every settlement included a non-disclosure agreement. Robert knew how to make problems disappear. Diana became HOA president of Maplecrest Estates within 14 months of arriving, running unopposed because nobody else wanted the position. Small HOA. 12 actual homes. Unremarkable. Until the boundaries started moving. I pulled the HOA's official county filings going back 9 years. The original boundary map covered exactly what you would expect: 12 residential properties clustered around a cul-de-sac half a mile from the main road. Neat. Contained. Normal. Then I found the amendments. First Amendment, filed 7 years ago. Boundary expansion. Modest. Added 2 adjacent parcels described as common area extensions. Approved by the HOA board. 3 signatures. One of them was my Uncle Gerald's. Second Amendment, 5 years ago. Larger expansion. More parcels absorbed into HOA jurisdiction. Gerald's signature again. Third Amendment, 3 years ago. The largest expansion. This one pushed the HOA boundary lines directly through the heart of my estate, through the farmland, the timber sections, all the way to the lakefront. Gerald's signature again. Except by 3 years ago, my uncle's degenerative condition had progressed significantly. Harold had told me that morning that Gerald had barely left the house in his final 2 years. Could not drive. Hands shook badly. Relied on Diana for grocery runs, prescription pickups, paperwork management. A man who could barely hold a pen had signed a boundary amendment that swallowed his own land. I sat back and stared at the ceiling for a moment. Then I pulled Robert Whitfield's business filings. Lakeview Development Partners, LLC, the company that bought the 400-acre lakefront parcel for $2.8 million. Registered in Delaware. Listed manager. A man named Thomas Green. No other public information. I cross-referenced Thomas Green against Robert's known associates. It took 40 minutes and 3 different databases. Thomas Green was Robert Whitfield's college roommate. Green Ridge Holdings, LLC, the company that received the timber parcels. Registered in Wyoming. Listed manager. A woman named Sandra Pierce. Sandra Pierce was Robert Whitfield's sister. I opened a fresh document and started building a chart. Shell companies on one side. Real identities on the other. Money flows in the middle. It was the kind of chart I would build before for clients suspected of creative bookkeeping, except those clients had been hiding tens of thousands. This chart was hiding millions. But one thing kept nagging at me. Diana and Robert's lifestyle, the Mercedes, the watch, the house I would found in property records, a 4-bedroom colonial assessed at $800,000, had started upgrading approximately 5 years before the first land sale. Before any of the transfers. Before the shell company money started flowing. So where had the early money come from? I went back to the HOA financial records. 9 years of dues collected from Maplecrest's 12-member properties plus the estate. I ran the numbers twice because the first result seemed wrong. It was not wrong. $380,000 in dues collected from the estate alone over 9 years. None of it deposited into the HOA's registered bank account. All of it gone. Diana had not just been stealing land. She had been practicing on the cash first. R. Colton was not hard to find. Harlan County had exactly one registered notary public by that name. Raymond Colton, 61 years old, operated out of a small office attached to his house on the east side of town. Insurance documents, property transfers, business filings. The kind of quiet essential service that small counties run on and nobody thinks about until they need it. I drove there on a Wednesday afternoon without calling ahead. The office was a converted garage, paneled walls, a metal desk, a shelf of binders organized by year. A bell above the door announced me when I walked in. Raymond Colton looked up from behind the desk, and I watched something move across his face in the half-second before he got it under control. Not surprise. Recognition. He knew who I was before I opened my mouth. Just like Diana had. "Miss Hendricks," he said carefully. "What can I do for you?" I sat down across from him without being invited and set the folder on his desk. 7 documents. His stamp on every one. I turned them to face him and let him look. He looked at them for a long time without speaking. His hands were flat on the desk. A man trying very hard to appear calm and not quite getting there. "These are Gerald Hendricks' property transfers," I said. "All 7 of them. Your stamp on every single one. I have a question." He said nothing. "March 14th, 4 years ago," I said. "Document 3, the timber parcel transfer. Your stamp is on it, notarized in Harlan County." I pulled out a second document. "This is a business filing from Mason County. Different document, different transaction, completely unrelated. Also notarized by R. Colton. Same date, same timestamp." I set them side by side. "Mason County is 90 minutes from here," I said. "You notarized 2 documents in 2 different counties at the same time, which means one of these stamps is not yours. Or you have 2 stamps." I paused. "Either way, that is a felony." Raymond Colton looked at the documents for a long time. Then he looked at me, and something in him just gave way, not dramatically, not with tears or raised voices, just a slow, quiet collapse of whatever he had been holding up for 8 years. His shoulders dropped half an inch. He exhaled through his nose. "She told me it was routine," he said. "The first time. A boundary amendment, standard HOA paperwork. The landowner was ill and could not come in person. She had power of attorney documentation. It looked legitimate." He stopped. "It was not until the 3rd one that I understood what I was actually doing." "But you kept doing it," I said. "Yes." No hesitation. No excuse attached. Just, yes. "How much did she pay you?" $41,000. Over 8 years. He said it like he knew how it sounded. Like he had been saying it to himself for years, and it never stopped sounding wrong. $400 a month, sometimes more for the larger transactions. $400 a month, for $4.2 million in fraudulent transfers. "Raymond," I said quietly, "the FBI is already investigating. They will get to you. The only question is whether you cooperate before they arrive or after." He nodded slowly, like he would already known this moment was coming and had simply been waiting for someone to say it out loud. "I will cooperate," he said. "I will give them everything." He picked up his phone and called his attorney before I even stood up. I walked back to my car and sat in the silence for a moment. $400 a month. Some people sell their integrity cheap. The tragedy is not the amount. It is that they always think it will stay small. 1 document, 1 stamp, 1 quiet favor. And then one day a woman sits across from them with a folder and the whole weight of 8 years lands on a metal desk in a converted garage, and there is nowhere left to look except straight at what you did. I started the car and drove back to the estate. Margaret needed to know about this conversation, and Raymond Colton needed to make a very important phone call. The key was taped to the underside of the desk drawer. I almost missed it. I would checked under the drawer the night before and found nothing. But I would been checking the bottom panel. This was taped to the inner back wall, flush against the wood, wrapped in a small square of electrical tape that blended perfectly with the dark stain. The kind of hiding spot you would only find if you were looking for it specifically, or if you were desperate enough to check everywhere twice. I peeled it off. Small brass key. Old but not rusted. Deliberate. The tin box opened with a soft click. Inside, no cash, no jewelry, no documents. Just a single USB drive. Black. Unmarked. The kind you buy in a 3-pack at a drugstore specifically because they are forgettable. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I plugged it in. 41 video files. All recorded on the same laptop camera, same angle. Gerald's study chair, the bookshelf visible behind him, afternoon light coming through the window to his left. The first file was dated 2 years ago. The last was dated 11 days before he died. I opened the first one. My uncle looked older than I expected. Thinner. His hands rested on his knees, and I could see immediately what Harold meant, a faint but constant tremor, worse on the left side. His eyes, though, were sharp, completely, unsettlingly sharp. The eyes of a man whose body was slowing down but whose mind had decided not to cooperate. He looked directly at the camera. "My name is Gerald Hendricks. Today is March 14th. This is the first of what I expect will be many recordings. I am making them because I am a careful man, and careful men document things. I have been documenting Diana Whitfield for approximately 8 months. I intend to continue until I have enough, or until I cannot." I sat very still. I should have acted sooner. I know that. But I was sick, and I was alone, and she was the person bringing my groceries. You make compromises when you are dependent on someone. Shameful ones. I am not proud of it. But I am done making them. I watched all 41 files. It took 4 hours. The recordings were extraordinary. Not dramatic. Gerald was not a dramatic man. They were methodical. Precise. The work of someone who had spent a lifetime being careful and had decided to apply that carefulness to the most important thing he would ever documented. He described every visit Diana made, every document she brought, every signature she asked for. He noted the dates, the exact language she used, the subtle pressure tactics, the way she would mention his medication costs right before asking him to sign something, the way she would remind him he had no other family nearby, the way she would leave long pauses after questions that were really instructions. He described watching his land disappear parcel by parcel and being unable to stop it alone. But the twist, the thing that made me press pause and sit in silence for a full minute, came in recording 17. "I want to be clear about something," Gerald said, leaning slightly forward. "I am not a helpless victim. I have been allowing Diana to believe I am more confused than I am. This was a deliberate decision. A confused man is not a threat. A confused man does not get investigated. A confused man gets managed, and a managed man gets access." He almost smiled. "Diana brings me documents to sign. I sign them. But for the past 14 months I have been introducing errors into every document she brings, subtle ones. The kind an accountant would catch and a real estate agent might not. Wrong acreage figures. Notary dates that appear twice in different counties. Parcel numbers that do not match the survey maps. A careful trail of inconsistencies buried inside documents she believes are clean." He folded his hands in his lap. "I left everything to my niece Claire because she is an accountant, because she will find the errors, because she will know what they mean. I could not stop Diana myself, but I could make sure the right person inherited the evidence. I had to stand up and walk to the window. He had not chosen me randomly. He had not chosen me out of sentiment or family obligation or because I was the only option. He had chosen me specifically, deliberately, professionally. He had watched me from a distance for years. My father had kept him updated apparently, quiet letters back and forth that I never knew about, and he had decided that of everyone he knew, an accountant was what this situation required. He had been building this case for 2 years. In his final recording, 11 days before he died, he looked directly at the camera one last time. His voice was quieter, slower, but his eyes were the same. "I am sorry I waited so long to find you, Claire. I am sorry I let her take so much before I acted. But it is all documented. Every error, every date, every discrepancy. It is all there. You just have to find it." He paused. "I know you will. You are an accountant. Finding things is what you do." The recording ended. I sat in my uncle's chair, in my uncle's study, surrounded by my uncle's carefully labeled maps and files, and I cried for the first time since Jonathan Reed had called me on that Tuesday morning. Then I picked up my phone and called Margaret Chen. She answered on the second ring. I said, "I need a real estate fraud attorney. I have 41 videos, 7 forged deeds, $4.2 million in fraudulent transfers, and a paper trail my uncle spent 2 years building." Silence on the other end. Then, "Miss Hendricks," Margaret said, "your uncle did not just leave you land. He left you a case." It was Harold who told me about Martin Geller. We were sitting on the farmhouse porch on a Thursday evening, the kind of quiet that settles over rural land when the light goes orange and the birds stop moving. Harold had taken to stopping by every few days, not intrusively, just checking in the way neighbors do when they have decided someone is worth checking on. He was halfway through his coffee when he said it. You know you are not the first person who tried to stop her. I looked at him. Martin Geller, he said. Owned 40 acres on the western boundary. Good man. Ran a small organic operation, vegetables, some fruit trees, sold at the farmer's market in town every Saturday. Been there 20 years. Harold turned his mug in his hands. 3 years ago he started noticing the same things you noticed. Fences in wrong places. HOA boundary maps that did not match his deed. He started asking questions. What happened? I asked. Harold was quiet for a moment. Diana happened, he said. First came the HOA violations, 12 of them in 2 weeks. Fence height, signage, noise ordinances, agricultural equipment visible from the road. Then a code enforcement complaint to the county. Then an anonymous tip to the state agricultural board claiming his operation was using unlicensed pesticides. He paused. The pesticide claim was completely fabricated, but the investigation took 8 months. During those 8 months, he could not sell at the farmer's market. The county suspended his vendor license pending the outcome. I set down my coffee. 8 months with no income, Harold continued. He had a mortgage, 2 kids in high school. He tried to fight the HOA violations, but Diana's attorney buried him in paperwork and filing fees. By month 6, he was behind on his mortgage. By month 9, the bank started foreclosure proceedings. Harold looked out at the tree line. He sold, took whatever he could get, and left. Diana's husband Robert bought the 40 acres through one of his companies 3 weeks after Martin signed the papers. The orange light had gone gray. Nobody said anything? I asked. Who were they going to tell? Harold said quietly. The county inspector was her cousin. The local paper ran the pesticide story without verifying it. The HOA board believed whatever Diana told them. He shook his head. We watched it happen, and we told ourselves it was not our business. That is the thing about people like Diana, they do not just take the land. They take the courage out of everyone around them, make it so nobody wants to be next. He finished his coffee and stood. Martin's in Columbus now, he said. Works at a hardware store. Sends me a message every Christmas. He picked up his jacket. He would want to know someone finally did something. I thought about Martin Geller the rest of that night. A man who had asked the same questions I was asking 3 years earlier, alone, without a USB drive full of evidence or a fraud attorney or an FBI contact. A man who had seen exactly what I was seeing and had been systematically destroyed for it. The difference between Martin and me was not courage. It was inheritance. I called Margaret the next morning and asked her to add Martin Geller's case to our documentation. The fabricated pesticide complaint, the coordinated HOA violations, the foreclosure timeline, Robert's acquisition of the land 3 weeks later. It became one of the most damning sections of the federal case file. And when sentencing came, the judge read every word of it. Margaret Chen and I met in person 3 days after that call, a Harlan County diner, halfway between the estate and her Columbus office. She ordered black coffee and a slice of pie and spent 45 minutes reviewing my documents without saying a single word. Then she looked up. I have handled real estate fraud cases for 16 years, she said. Corporate schemes, title washing, deed forgery, the whole spectrum. I want you to understand what I am about to tell you. She tapped the folder. This is the most thoroughly documented private fraud case I have ever seen. Your uncle was meticulous. He was an engineer before he retired, I said. It shows. She pulled out a legal pad and started writing. Fast, neat, organized. I liked her immediately. The strategy came together over the next 2 weeks. First, the quiet title lawsuit. Margaret filed it within days, formally challenging all 7 fraudulent transfers and demanding full restoration of the 1,100 acres. The moment it hit the court docket, every shell company involved was legally frozen, no further sales, no transfers, no liquidation of assets. Robert Whitfield's phone, Margaret told me later, had lit up like a Christmas tree within hours. Second, the FBI. Margaret had a contact at the field office in Columbus, an agent named Reyes who specialized in real estate and wire fraud. We submitted a formal tip with the complete evidence package. Gerald's video recordings, the forged documents, the shell company connections, the notary irregularities, the fired county employee's complaint. Agent Reyes called back within 48 hours. We have had complaints from 2 neighboring counties involving similar shell company structures, she told Margaret. We have been building something, but we did not have enough to move. Your client's evidence fills the gap. We are opening a full federal investigation. Gerald's patient 2-year paper trail had just broken a case wider than even I had realized. Third, the witnesses. I reached out to the luxury resort developer who had purchased the lakefront parcel. His name was Paul Garrett, a legitimate businessman who had paid $2.8 million for land he believed had clean title. When Margaret explained the situation, he went completely silent on the phone for a long moment. I had no idea, he said finally. His voice was tight. None. I did full due diligence. The title search came back clean. Because the notary who certified the documents was part of the scheme, Margaret said. Paul Garrett became our most cooperative witness. He had receipts, wire transfer records, every communication with the shell company going back 3 years. He handed all of it over within 24 hours. The logging company was the same story, blindsided, furious, immediately cooperative. But the witness I had not expected came from inside the HOA itself. His name was Tom Briggs, 67 years old, retired schoolteacher. One of the 12 actual Maplecrest Estates homeowners had lived there for 11 years, long before Diana arrived. He knocked on the farmhouse door on a Thursday evening holding a cardboard box. I have been waiting for someone like you to show up, he said, setting the box on the kitchen table. I just did not know if anyone ever would. Inside the box, 4 years of HOA meeting minutes. Every single one. Tom had been quietly making copies since the year he first noticed Diana's meeting records did not match what had actually been discussed. Fake votes. Fabricated board approvals. Motions that were never raised being recorded as unanimous decisions. She approved every land transfer through the HOA board, Tom said. On paper it looks like a legitimate vote. In reality, she was the only one who knew what she was voting on. The rest of us were told it was routine administrative business. He looked at his hands. I knew something was wrong. I just did not have the courage to act alone. She buried the last person who asked questions in code violations and legal threats. I have a mortgage. I have a wife. He paused. I am sorry I waited. You are here now, I said. He nodded and pushed the box toward me. Diana, meanwhile, had not been idle. Within 10 days of my courthouse visit, 14 code violations appeared on the estate filed overnight, covering everything from fence height to agricultural equipment storage to an allegedly unlicensed structure near the creek that had been standing since 1987. A county inspector showed up 2 days later. He was brisk, unfriendly, and according to Margaret's subsequent research, Diana's second cousin on her mother's side. An anonymous tip went to the local newspaper suggesting the estate's new heir was an out-of-town opportunist looking to sell the land to developers and destroy the community. 3 OA members I would never met received letters warning them that associating with me could jeopardize their own property standing. I documented every move, photographed every notice, forwarded every letter to Margaret and Agent Reyes. Diana was rattled. Rattled people make mistakes. And then Margaret called me on a Friday afternoon, voice carefully controlled in the way it got when something significant had happened. Agent Reyes just confirmed, she said. Federal search warrant approved. They move on Diana's home office Monday morning. I looked out the window at my uncle's land, at the lake glinting through the tree line. Good, I said. Monday morning came cold and clear. I was standing at the kitchen window with my coffee when Margaret called at 7:43. They are executing the warrant now, she said. Agent Reyes says it is clean, no resistance, no complications. Diana was home. I said nothing, just watched the light move across the lake. There is something else, Margaret continued. Robert's LLC accounts were frozen this morning by court order, all 7 of them. His attorney has already called Agent Reyes twice. Robert was panicking. Good. The search of Diana's home office took 6 hours. What they found, according to Agent Reyes, who called Margaret that afternoon, was more than anyone had anticipated. A dedicated filing system for every property transaction going back 9 years. Physical copies of every forged document, including versions that predated the ones filed with the county drafts, with handwriting notes in the margins in Diana's handwriting. A separate laptop used exclusively for HOA business, password protected, which their tech team cracked within 3 hours, and a spreadsheet. Detailed, color-coded, obsessively maintained. Every transaction listed. Every shell company. Every amount received. Every distribution made. Diana had kept perfect records of her own crimes. Margaret laughed when she told me. Fraudsters always do. They are too organized not to. It is the same instinct that makes them good at the scheme. It also documents it completely. My uncle would have appreciated the irony. 2 days later, Diana's attorney called Margaret with a settlement offer. The language was careful, professional, designed to sound reasonable. Diana's position, the attorney explained, was that certain administrative errors had occurred in the HOA's management of boundary amendments and property transfers. She was prepared to acknowledge those errors in a private agreement. In exchange for dropping all civil claims and cooperating with a narrative of good faith mistakes, she would return 3 of the 7 parcels, approximately 400 acres, and forgive the $52,000 in back dues. Margaret read it to me over the phone. I let her finish. "No," I said. "I have already drafted the response," Margaret said. I could hear the smile in her voice. She sent it an hour later. 1 paragraph. Our client declines. Full restoration of all 1,100 acres and restitution of $4.2 million or federal court. There will be no further negotiation on these terms. Diana's attorney did not respond for 2 days. When he did, it was 3 words. "We will be in touch." He was not in touch again. Tom Briggs testified before the federal grand jury the following week. He walked them through 4 years of fabricated meeting minutes, fake votes, invented motions, board approvals that had never actually occurred. He explained how Diana had structured the HOA meetings to create a paper trail of apparent legitimacy, how she would describe every land transaction to the board as routine administrative business without specifying what was actually being transferred or to whom. The grand jury sat with that for a long time. The county notary, R. Colton, was offered immunity in exchange for full cooperation. He took it within 24 hours. His testimony confirmed what Gerald's videos had suggested. Colton had notarized documents he knew were fraudulent, had appeared in 2 counties on the same day on multiple occasions using a second stamp he kept specifically for Diana's transactions, and had received $41,000 in cash payments over 8 years in a series of envelopes left in his car. $41,000. For $4.2 million in transactions. The cheapest part of the whole scheme. Then came the development that nobody saw coming. Robert Whitfield's personal attorney, not his corporate counsel, his personal attorney, contacted Agent Reyes directly and requested a meeting. Without Diana's knowledge. Without notifying her legal team. Robert wanted a deal. He was prepared to provide full testimony against Diana in exchange for reduced charges. Every offshore account. Every LLC structure. Every contact involved in the scheme from the beginning. He would give them everything. Margaret called me the moment she heard. "Diana's husband just flipped on her," she said. I set down my coffee cup. "How bad is it for her?" I asked. "He was the architect," Margaret said. "He found Gerald through a database of elderly single rural landowners with no immediate family. He designed the whole structure, the shell companies, the notary arrangement, the HOA boundary expansions. If Robert testifies fully, Diana's exposure increases significantly." I thought about that for a moment. "And Robert? He is trying to walk away lighter." A pause. "He will not. Not if I have anything to say about it." I looked out at the lake. Somewhere out there, Diana Whitfield was sitting in her $800,000 colonial, watching everything she would built for 9 years collapse around her, while her own husband negotiated his way out of the wreckage. That night, I got an anonymous call. Unknown number. Single sentence, spoken quickly, voice I almost recognized but could not place. "She is planning to run, tomorrow morning." The line went dead. I stared at my phone for a long time. Then I called Margaret. Federal agents arrived at Diana's house at 6:15 in the morning. I know because Agent Reyes called me afterward and told me exactly how it went. She knew I needed to hear it. She had been doing this long enough to understand that some people need the details not out of cruelty but because the details make it real. Make it final. Diana was outside when they arrived. Not running. Not loading a car. Not doing anything that looked like flight. She was sitting on her front porch steps in a coat and shoes, a small bag beside her, hands folded in her lap. Like she would been waiting. Like she would known the exact time they were coming and had decided that the least dignified thing she could do was make them find her inside. She stood when they pulled up. Did not resist. Did not speak. Held out her wrists. Agent Reyes said it was the quietest arrest she would made in 11 years. The charges were read at booking. Wire fraud. Mail fraud. Mail fraud. Deed forgery. Money laundering. Conspiracy. Obstruction of justice. 6 counts, federal, each carrying its own weight. Robert was arrested the same morning at his office downtown, his personal attorney present, deal already in motion, expression carefully composed into something that wanted to look like cooperation but read as pure self-preservation. Margaret called me with the news at 7:41. I was already awake. I had not slept. 3 days later, Diana requested a meeting. Not with her attorney. Not with the prosecution. With me. Margaret advised against it. Agent Reyes advised against it. I went anyway because my uncle had spent 2 years building a case instead of looking away, and I figured the least I could do was hear what the person he would built it against had to say. We met in Margaret's conference room. Recorded. Witnessed. Diana arrived with her new attorney, her third, the previous 2 having developed sudden scheduling conflicts, and sat down across from me for the first time since she would handed me that binder at my gate. She looked different. Still composed. But the performance was gone. The practiced smile, the rehearsed answers, the binder as weapon, all of it gone. What was left underneath was just a tired woman in her 50s who had made a series of choices and was now sitting inside the consequences of them. She looked at me for a moment before she spoke. Robert found Gerald, she said. Not me. He had a database, elderly single landowners, rural properties, no immediate family nearby. Gerald fit every category. Robert identified him as a target 2 years before I ever met him. I said nothing. Let her continue. I was supposed to befriend him, build trust, manage his paperwork, feed information back to Robert about the property, the boundaries, the title structure. I did not know the full scope of what Robert was planning in the beginning. She paused. By the time I did, I was already on 3 of the documents, already implicated. Robert made sure of that before he told me everything. That was deliberate. He needed insurance. Her hands were flat on the table. Steady. I am not telling you this to excuse what I did. I stayed. I continued. I signed things and I collected money, and I told myself it was too late to stop. She looked at the table. It is never too late to stop. I know that now. It is just that stopping gets more expensive the longer you wait. I thought about my uncle sitting alone in that study, hands trembling, recording videos into a laptop because the woman bringing his groceries was stealing his land. He was a good man, I said. He deserved better than what you gave him. Yes, she said quietly. He did. She looked up. The anonymous call, she said. That was me. I called you the night before the arrest because... She stopped. Started again. Because I was going to run. I had a bag packed and a car arranged and I was 20 minutes from leaving. And I sat on those steps and I thought about your uncle's face in those last months and I could not. Her voice stayed even. I could not add that to everything else. The room was very quiet. It took 4 months to work through the federal proceedings. Robert's deal reduced his exposure on paper, but Margaret fought every concession. When sentencing came, she stood before the judge and walked through every document, every video, every shell company, every dollar, the full architecture of what Robert Whitfield had built using Diana as his instrument and Gerald Hendricks as his target. The judge listened to all of it. Robert Whitfield received 19 years. Diana Whitfield received 7, with full cooperation credit. Every offshore account disclosed. Every contact named. Every LLC unwound to its source. She had called me the night before her arrest. It did not make her innocent. But it meant something. I was not sure yet exactly what. Maybe I did not need to be. Spring came to Harlan County slowly that year. First, just a suggestion of it, the tree lines softening at the edges, the creek running higher and faster with snowmelt, the mornings losing their bite 1 degree at a time. Then one morning I walked out to the lake at dawn and the water was reflecting blue sky instead of gray, and I stood there for a long time doing nothing in particular. Just standing on my land. All 3,400 acres of it. The court orders had come through in February. All 7 fraudulent transfers voided. All 1,100 acres restored to the estate in full. The quiet title suit resolved without trial. Once Robert's testimony dismantled the shell company structure, there was nothing left to contest. The parcels came back one by one like something being returned that had always known where it belonged. Margaret called me after the last order was signed. "It is done," she said. 2 words. I would expected more. But 2 words were exactly right. I sat at my uncle's desk for a long time after that call. Just sat. The maps on the walls, the files in the drawers, the tin box on the corner of the desk with the key sitting beside it now, no reason to lock it anymore, nothing left to protect that was not already protected. Gerald had spent 2 years in this chair building something in secret. Alone. Sick. Afraid probably, though he never said so in any of the recordings. He had done it anyway because he was a careful man, and careful men finish what they start. I thought about what it must have cost him. Not the land, the loneliness. Watching someone dismantle your life piece by piece while bringing your groceries and asking how you slept. Pretending to be more confused than you were. Playing a long quiet game when every instinct probably screamed to confront, to demand, to fight openly. He had chosen patience instead. Had chosen me instead. I hoped wherever he was, he knew it had worked. Paul Garrett reached out the week after sentencing. He still wanted to develop the lakefront parcel. Legitimately this time, properly structured, clean title. His offer was reasonable. My counterproposal was better, not a sale but a partnership. 15% equity stake, a conservation easement protecting the northern shoreline permanently, and a clause requiring local hiring for all construction and operations. He agreed to all of it without negotiating. The resort would be built, but the lake would stay the lake. The northern shoreline, the part my uncle had walked every morning according to Harold, the part he would love most, would stay exactly as it was. Untouched. Protected in perpetuity by a legal document that no HOA boundary amendment could ever reach. My uncle had spent 40 years protecting that shoreline. I made sure nobody could take it again. The logging company paid full restitution, $900,000, transferred in a single payment the morning their cooperation agreement was finalized. I put it into the land trust. Margaret helped me structure it properly, a legitimate nonprofit entity, transparent governance, clear mandate, protection and responsible stewardship of the estate in perpetuity. Tom Briggs agreed to sit on the board. Tom, 67 years old, retired schoolteacher. 4 years of secretly copied meeting minutes in a cardboard box that he would carry around like a quiet burden waiting for somewhere to set it down. He would have been the most ordinary kind of brave, not the kind that announces itself, not the kind that gets celebrated. The kind that just keeps showing up and documenting and waiting for the moment it can finally matter. When I called him about the trust, he was silent for a moment. "You did not have to ask me," he said. "I know," I said. "That is why I asked." He showed up the following Monday with a folder of governance suggestions he would apparently been drafting for weeks. I should have known. Harold got his lease. Proper paperwork this time, drawn up by Margaret, fair terms, 20-year renewable. He would been farming that eastern field informally for 11 years, paying my uncle in vegetables and occasional fence repairs, which knowing Gerald seemed exactly right. He stood in the kitchen when I handed him the signed copy and looked at it for a long time without speaking. His hands were shaking slightly. Not from age. From something else. "Gerald would have done this years ago," he finally said, "if she had not gotten in the way." "He did it," I said. "It just took a while to arrive." Harold nodded. Folded the lease carefully and put it in his jacket pocket like something precious. Then he picked up his hat and walked back out to his field without another word. Some people express gratitude loudly. Harold expressed it by going back to work on land that was finally, properly, legally his to work. David Marsh, the county records employee fired 2 weeks after filing his complaint, filed a wrongful termination suit with help from Margaret's colleague. The county settled within 60 days. Quietly. Quickly. The kind of settlement that happens when everyone involved knows exactly what the alternative looks like. Patricia, the records clerk who had slid that complaint across the counter without a word, kept her job. I sent her a handwritten note. She sent back a single line on county letterhead. Some of us were waiting a long time for someone to come looking. I kept that note. Put it in the tin box alongside Gerald's letter. I did not go back to Columbus. I handed my client files to a colleague, gave up my apartment, and moved into the farmhouse permanently sometime in March. I am not sure of the exact date. There was no single decision, just a gradual accumulation of mornings where leaving seemed less sensible than staying. I sit at my uncle's desk now. His maps are still on the walls. His files are still in the drawers, alongside mine. The farmhouse still smells like old wood and something close to loneliness, but less so now. Loneliness needs silence and stillness to survive. Harold stops by. Tom calls. Margaret sends documents that require signatures and occasionally stays for dinner. The land is the same land it always was. I am not the same person who drove down that gravel road 8 months ago, not knowing what she was driving toward. Gerald had known. He would known before I did. On the last night before I closed the federal case file, I read his letter one more time. Then I folded it carefully and put it back in the tin box beside Patricia's note and the USB drive and the small brass key. He had not left me a property. He would left me a purpose. Martin Geller came back to Harlan County on a Saturday morning in June. Harold had called him. Had not told me he was going to, just made the call one evening and mentioned it afterward with the matter-of-fact tone of someone who has decided a thing needs doing and done it. He should see it, Harold said simply. He deserves to see it. I agreed. Martin was 53, quieter than I expected. Harold had described him as someone who used to fill a room, who used to run his farmer's market stall like a one-man performance, calling out to regulars by name, arguing cheerfully about the superior qualities of his heirloom tomatoes. That man was still in there somewhere. But 3 years of starting over had put a careful stillness over him, the kind that settles on people who have learned not to expect things. He shook my hand at the gate and looked past me at the land. Harold told me what you did, he said. With the case. With his testimony. His testimony helped, I said. The judge read all of it. Martin nodded slowly. We walked in silence for a while down the main path, past the farmhouse toward the western boundary where his 40 acres had been. Robert Whitfield's acquisition of Martin's land had been included in the federal asset forfeiture proceedings, seized along with the shell company holdings, frozen along with everything else Robert had built. The land trust had petitioned for its inclusion in the estate restoration, a longer legal process, a separate filing, an argument that took Margaret 3 months to construct and win. But she won it. Martin's 40 acres were now held in trust, protected. Part of the same legal structure that protected the rest of the estate. We stopped at the boundary fence. The real one, the correct one, the one that matched the survey maps. Martin stood there for a long time looking at his old land. The fruit trees were still there. Overgrown now, unpruned for 3 years, growing in the wild, undirected way trees grow when nobody is tending them. But alive, still producing probably in their messy, overgrown way. I planted those trees the first year I was here, he said quietly. Took 3 seasons to get the first real harvest. I let the silence sit. Then I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folded document. Margaret had drawn it up the week before. I would been waiting for the right moment. It is a lease, I said. Same terms as Harold's. 20 years renewable. Fair rate. The land stays in trust permanently. It can never be sold, never be seized, never be absorbed into someone else's boundary lines. I held it out. But you would farm it, same as before. Martin looked at the document without taking it for a moment. Why? He asked. Not suspicious. Just genuinely asking. Because Diana took it from you using my uncle's land as cover, I said. Because you asked the right questions 3 years before I did and got destroyed for it. Because those are your trees. I paused. And because Gerald would have done the same thing. He just did not get the chance. Martin took the document. He did not open it immediately. Just held it with both hands and looked out at the overgrown fruit trees in the morning light. A long, quiet moment that belonged entirely to him. I will need to get back up here, he said finally. Those trees need serious work. Harold said he would help, I said. He has been eyeing them for 2 years apparently. Martin almost smiled. The first real one I would seen from him. We walked back to the farmhouse and I made coffee and Harold arrived 20 minutes later like he would timed it, which he probably had, and the 3 of us sat at Gerald's kitchen table while the June light moved across the floor and the land sat quiet and enormous outside every window. Later, after Martin had gone and Harold had headed back to his field, I stood at the gate one last time. The same gate where Diana had been waiting 8 months ago. The same gravel. The same tree line. The same lake glinting through the trees. I thought of my uncle's letter. The land knows who it belongs to. He had not just meant 3,400 acres. He had meant all of it, every person Diana had tried to erase, every question she had tried to bury, every careful, quiet act of resistance that had kept the truth alive long enough for someone to finally arrive and find it. The land knew. It had always known. It was just waiting for us to catch up.